Hello, bonjour, and welcome to the unofficial PopCap Popcast, a podcast about the golden age of PopCap games by two guys who were there at the time. I'm Steve Notley.
And I'm Isaac Aubrey, and we want to make sure everybody is aware that we do not represent PopCap or EA or PopCap under EA. We are just talking about the good old days before that big buyout happened and what it's like to work in an indie game studio that is on the rise. And today we are going into the second part of an interview with Ed Allard, who came into PopCap as part of Sprout Games and was a senior producer on games early on. He then led the development of all of our console adaptations of our old games, and then was elevated to the position of director of games worldwide studios for PopCap, and has some really interesting takes on how things went down during the buyout and the lead up to that. And we're going to get right into it.
Previously on the unofficial PopCap Popcast.
Well, and then I was handed the org chart and I'm like, okay, so who do all these people report to as manager? And I think the number was 118 of those people reported to me directly.
Oh boy.
Whoa.
On day one on the job. I'm like, what is it? Because remember, we had been starting our games as services around that time. So we
Mhm.
had a bunch of server developers and DevOps team that was managing all the servers. Um,
That
we
was all the
had,
Blitz stuff at the time,
started
right?
some social stuff. We had all the mobile stuff. We had a studio. Uh, we had not acquired the San Francisco studio yet, I think, but we had the Hidden Object Game studio in Vancouver. We had Mike Bay in Chicago. We had I feel like there's we had the George fan
Right, right, yeah.
San Mateo or
There's the Shanghai studio.
and there was a Shanghai studio. So
Right.
I was like, number one, I don't want Asia. Like, no. And so James Gwertzman ended up taking the Asia stuff. But number two, I was like, going back to our earlier conversation about managing down, how can I actually make sure 118 individuals
Well,
are taken
yeah, I mean,
care of?
I don't have an MBA, but I'm pretty certain that it's like, okay, no manager can competently manage 100 people, right?
Right.
Like,
And so
certainly not as their
that
direct
became my
reports.
first job was to actually try to get some managers who wanted to be managers in place so that people would have somewhere to go because I there just weren't enough hours in the day for me to make sure that everyone from DevOps to new IP developers to QA were getting what they needed.
It's
Um,
such a weird catch 22 because in prior episodes we've talked about how, one of the things that we sort of felt as PopCap transitioned to become the kind of business that was going to be bought and then eventually was bought was that it just sort of seemed like they were just pouring more managers in like molasses. Uh, and you just kind of go like, well, so there's just more and more and more middle management, but at the same, and you kind of go like, is this helpful? But on the other hand, you go like, well, without that, you dream of having this sort of flat organizational structure, but without additional managers, you end up with these absurd situations like you're describing, where it's like, okay, well, then now one person is supposed to be the direct boss of like 100 people, and like that's ridiculous to imagine that any person can get any proper attention that way,
And
right?
it's a big critique of a higher up manager if they can't delegate like that. You have to be able to like delegate out to other folks and put out a little fires that way, which it sounds like you did at that point. You started getting other management in.
yeah, that it was overnight. My job went from being very hands-on, like with all the platform stuff. I reviewed every single game that we were working on. I was, deeply involved in giving Matt feedback on PVZ Xbox and, Dan Benet, who was working on the iPad PVZ, Heather Hazen, who was doing a bunch of the handheld platform stuff at the time. Yeah, I was working closely with games, not new IP development, but making sure that everything felt great. And so part of my job was spreadsheets, but part of my job was really hands-on helping games be better.
I do want to step back a little bit and just what was your memory of the PVZ2 development, or was it just kind of like I was so busy I didn't have real time to pay attention to that because I was dealing with all this other stuff, which is fine. I'm just looking for any sorts of information I can get about like how that game came to be because I know it has its own sort of weird, crazy, tortured history of which I only know these tiny little slivers, right?
Yeah, so that's the creation of the Star Chamber. Um, I'll use your term. We didn't call it the Star Chamber because we didn't want to be the Star Chamber. But I hired in some managers so that I was not directly managing everybody.
Okay.
This is when people like Matt Scott, DJ, Dev Madan, Fritz Haberman, those kinds of people kind of came in and started taking some of the responsibilities of managing whole chunks of development directly, right? And so that gave me an insulation layer. And then the other part of my job was to create the big spreadsheet of here's all the stuff that we're working on. Here's when we think it's going to be done. Here, some of them were really big, fuzzy, I have no idea. And some of them were like, it's going to be done this date. Here's all the people who are working on all those things. Is this the right mix?
Right.
And so the Star Chamber was myself and my direct reports, right? So all the managers who should represent most of the developers at the company, and the three founders who were always sort of a little bit off to the side in terms of the daily management of the company.
Right.
I don't think Jason ever managed a
Well,
person.
right, because none of them came into it as managers
Yep.
or having necessarily even had a lot of experience being managed. I mean, so like, I mean, a simple question, almost a philosophical one, like, because now, Isaac, you've talked about the siloing effect that we all sort of started to perceive as starting to happen in the lead up to the buyout. So, like, if you're going to silo, should you silo by game or should you silo by discipline? That seems to be like a huge it's like on one hand, it makes sense to just go like everybody in the game answers to one person in charge of this game, and that silo includes all these different disciplines. Or you go, okay, well, no, all the engineers answer to one person, all the artists answer to another person, and so on. And there's sort of like these are two completely different philosophies of business organization. Do you have an opinion about which one's better?
I do. For me, I wanted to silo by discipline, and that's actually where we started. Matt Scott was a development manager, Dev Madan was an art director. Fritz Haberman was basically in charge of, he was a CTO, but he was really in charge of like infrastructure, code infrastructure. And it was discipline. And then producers kind of reached across all of those. And they didn't have management responsibility, but they got resources from across all of those different silos. And that was sort of the matrix was producers get resources, teams pulled from across all the silos, but hey, I want to be a better engineer. How do I be a better engineer? It's not the job of the Plants versus Zombies organization to make you a better engineer. It's the job of the engineering organization to make you. That shifted really based on EA's feedback, which was you need to become franchises. You need to organize yourselves entirely around franchises. I remember having that conversation with
Huh.
John Riccatello pre-buyout. He was like, cool, I see a lot of cool stuff that I really, really like, but you guys really need to be organized around franchise.
I remember that. That's whenever I say silo, that's totally what I'm referring to is that moment
Yep.
where it was like now we have the Peggle franchise, and this is the creative director of just that franchise. And it
Yep.
did seem to really disconnect everybody on a certain level that it was kind of an experiment. Like, well, now we're going to see how this works.
Yep.
And we're going to get a crash course in what happens when the person in charge of franchise that shall not be named isn't all that good as a manager of people or projects.
Yeah, and part of the reasoning behind this, if you are at the top tiers of business looking down, is you want the business responsibility for a game to come from the management responsibility. So if you need the PVZ business to be worth $10 million, you want the person who's responsible for saying PVZ is worth $10 million to have control of the resources needed to deliver on that $10 million. So that's the inverse logic is if I'm looking at a spreadsheet, I'm putting money in to get money out of this spreadsheet. cool, I'm pouring money into PVZ. I'm not pouring money into engineering. I'm pouring money
Mhm.
into PVZ and I'm getting money out of PVZ. So the sort of spreadsheet looks like a franchise in out equation. I don't
Makes
think
more
that's the
sense
best
on
thing for
that
the
end.
people. And
Yeah.
that gets back to sort of the managing down versus managing up. I think it does a disservice to the people because the guy who's passionate about Peggle is not necessarily the guy who's going to make you a better engineer or a better artist.
Right.
Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
Then you would have been in that position during the whole pig up like business, right?
yes, yes. So I I will say, first of all, that literally for years after leaving PopCap, I lost sleep at night over pickup.
Oh
Oh,
no.
I'm going to straight up say, out of all the mistakes I made at PopCap, like I see Pig Up as the biggest, like the world is a worse place because we canceled Pig Up out of all the mistakes I made. And this is not just because of you guys being here. It's like I passionately loved that game. And to me, like not being able to make Pig Up make sense was one of the defining moments that basically started me kind of engineering my exit from the company in a graceful but like
well, I'm not going to disagree, but I think like I mean, you said that you listened to the pig up episode, so I mean, I think you know that neither Isaac nor I like have a beef with you about
Oh,
how that
absolutely not.
went
Yeah.
down, right? And it's
no,
sort of like
I think you're actually very, very kind.
Well,
uh,
the thing is, though, is it from our perspective, at least from mine, sitting a lot of those meetings. I mean, there was Jason and Sukbir and all these different eyes on it that had really, critical information to feed to us. And
Joe
so,
and
like,
JD and
and I
like
know,
so many
yeah,
J, so many people
yeah,
whose names start with J. I think that's
Right.
where the coherence just broke down. Too many J names.
but I mean, and so I know that you were also hearing all of that and in a position where you had to make decisions based on all of that. And it was also this really critical point in time. I can see how all of it kind of was going to, why it would play out the way it did.
Here are a few factors that kind of went into the pig up decision making. Number one, we we started pig up pre buyout, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so yeah, it's I had done work on it the year prior, sort of developing the prototype and so on. Then I think it was like after the holiday party of 2000 and then like going into 2011, and 2011 was the buyout, like mid 2011. And I think we were working on first half of 2011 was the pig up time where we actually said, okay, we're going to go forward with this. We're going to put together this team. It's going to be Isaac producing, Steve designing, Matt doing the art, and we got to get ourselves an action script coder. And we got Russ, and we did all the stuff that we did
Yeah.
in that little slice of time before then, the buyout in July of 2011. So yeah,
Right. And yeah, and that was a very awkward time. I was under a lot of weird pressure at that time because I knew how actively we were courting acquisition, and I was deeply involved in meetings and presentations and spreadsheets and lawyers and all this stuff, kind of presenting ourselves. But at the same time, I couldn't tell the studio any of that.
right,
It needed to not be revealed who we were talking to, that we were talking to anybody. We were still considering an IPO. So if there's going to be an IPO, you can't disclose stuff. And so there's all these kind of you can't say a single thing. You've got to operate as if business as usual, but also package this thing up to be really juicy to sell. Go was kind of my remit at the time. Like, oh,
right.
but Pig Up came at a time where we had expectations for games that were PVZ sized.
That aligns with our understanding as well, is that it was just like, I mean, and Riccatello said it at the buyout meeting. It's like, hey, everything's going to be awesome. Plants, Bejeweled has made $75 million. So we just need to make a bunch more move games
Yep.
that are that big. Go. And everyone was like glug glug glug, drank the gallon size pail of Kool-Aid and charged out to try to make that happen. But it meant then that it was like, oh, well, if we can't guarantee this is going to be a bejeweled size hit, we suddenly have cold feet.
And so the expectations were giant, and so and our risk tolerance was going down. And I was actively like every week when I would sit in conversations with Dave Roberts, I would say, should we just not pretend to do new IP? Like straight up, should we be doing new
Which is
IP?
where PopCap eventually ended up, though sadly, I don't think PopCap was ever honest with itself on an executive level, and I was there until 2022, right? And I don't think PopCap or anything that proceeded from the buyout until then, they were never able to go like, well, I think the closest we got was, I'm blanking on his name, sort of one of the CEOs of latter day PopCap, who basically laid it out. It's like, if we had hit our numbers, we would have a lot more freedom to experiment and have fun, but we haven't, and we're not gonna get that freedom until we start shipping some hits.
Yeah.
Which was a pretty blunt way of putting it, but at least that was a kind of cards on the table sort of thing. But that was years after, right?
Yeah, and that was the reality we were operating under, except we weren't saying it out loud.
Hmm.
That, I think that's the reality. And I tried to be very blunt in my conversations with the CEO, it's Dave Roberts at the time. I was like, hey, like new IP is dying. If we kill new IP, we're going to lose a bunch of people because that's why they're here. But maybe that's not who we are anymore. We should just not, pretend like we're doing new IP just to, have the exercise of doing it and then kill everything because no spreadsheet told us PVZ was going to be the size that PVZ was. So no spreadsheet is going to tell us that Pig Up or Popcorn Dragon or Solitaire Blitz is going to be the size that PVZ was because spreadsheets
Yeah, I
They
mean,
don't
and
go
we
there.
could,
don't
Yeah.
I
predict
mean,
lightning.
exactly. And this is something that we all knew. We could go look, you know, the the kinds of decisions, if it was like PopCap 2014, let's say, you go, the way we run things now has made it impossible for us to make a game like Plants vs. Zombies, which is the game that we are now like pinning everything on as the future of this studio. And we have committed to a method of production that excludes our biggest successes, and yet, as you say, we just cannot actually be honest and state it outright, or even recognize the sort of absurd contradiction in it in the first place.
Yeah, and so I lived the contradiction, which was why I ultimately left. But you can also kind of see from my perspective, I tried to create some boxes to protect it in a bunch of different ways. One was Pop Camp, where
Right.
I was, trying to create creative outlets where, we might tinder some little flames of something that we couldn't resist. One was supporting MLJ on Fourth and Battery. Yeah, that's a top three regret. Like Fourth and Battery as a creative outlet to keep new IP
Yep,
cycling.
yep, yeah. We talked to MLJ a fair bit about that in prior podcasts. So yeah,
Pig Up was like, hey, we got something here. Let's actually try to do a PopCap style. Let's go do a PopCap style game. I tried to draw a box around that. And then after that, when we were franchised, I tried to create the new IP franchise where, everybody hated it because everybody wanted to be in it and not everybody could be in it. But ultimately, that never even got off the ground.
yeah. Or because then it's sort of like, all right, so then all of us are here working at PopCap, you know, doing our day jobs, pushing forward like the iterations of the already existing franchises. Everybody has a dream of creating their own game and creating a new franchise. But then that approach is sort of like, okay, we're going to go through and pick like the prettiest people to be on our team in the soccer game at lunchtime at school. I'm just going to pick all my faves, and they get to play the fun game. Everybody else has to just sit here and play the lame games.
Yep.
It's kind of like, but again, it's like we don't. No solution is perfect, right? And you could look back at that and go, that was going to be a problem, right? Like there were definitely going to be some resentments that come out of trying to do this. Man, and it is sort of a bummer that it's like, well, we thought it had a shot at working, and but then the fact that that's like, well, not only did it create the resentments, but it didn't end up creating our next big franchise. Do you even remember who that team was and what the pitches were?
For the new IP.
Yeah,
No, no. So at that point when I was trying to create the new IP, that was my last gasp effort
right,
to stay at PopCap, where I had actually reorganized myself out of a job. So Dave Roberts was creating business directives for each of the franchises, which were going through me to each of the franchise directors. And I was like, look, Dave, you don't need me. Like
right,
I'm just telling the franchise directors what you want, and then I'm telling the franchise directors are telling me what to tell you. Like, take me out of it. And so I sort of organized myself out and cool, now what do I do? I really want to actually bring back old PopCap in some form. Give me 4 or 5 people and let me just cook on some stuff. And we couldn't get
right.
there.
Yeah.
That was the final for me.
I love the spirit of that and the idea of trying to hold on to what was essentially what created PopCap in the first place and where all this great stuff came from. And I feel like that's a real critical moment with someone who, had done this at Sprout and had done this in early PopCap and had seen this all go down, still just trying to like, come on, this is where it comes from, and now all these years later, we get to kind of see how it all played out after like, no, there's no new IP.
Well, and
And
and it's a bummer too because you just sort of go like no one is a villain in this story. Like no one is setting
no.
out to be bad or to waste money or to make bad games or anything like that. Each of these decisions sort of makes sense in its own terms at the time. And yet even now when we look back and we still would not be able to say, well, with hindsight, what we should have done was dot dot dot. We don't even know that, right? Like we don't even go like if we had only done this, it would have been great.
That's
We
true.
still
That's
don't
true.
know that, right?
Just a different environment for creating stuff. Like I think had there not been all the pressures of the buyout, then and we just been growing, or maybe done an IPO, then that would have made a lot of sense to have that incubator going like that.
The best alternate version I've come up with is the version where PopCap decides not to become an acquisition target. And PopCap decides rather than pivot towards social microtransaction to see the rise of Steam and pivot
Mm.
to PC indie
Hmm.
and become a big dog in PC indie, sort of Steam PC games and sort
Because
of
that has been huge ever since.
push
Yeah.
Yeah.
back push back to the roots as
Hmm.
opposed to the microtransaction freemium.
Well, and the mobile, right? I mean, that was the other thing. I mean, certainly if you were to, as you
And
say that you
and
left like shortly after the buyout, that was where it was like within a year we were having all hands with John Vici going, okay, we're not doing anything except mobile. We are a platform specific company now. I do just want to, I'd hate myself if I didn't, but like at the conclusion of the Pig Up experience, the prize, we talked about this in the previous episode, but like the fact that you, I think in good faith, made this prize to genuinely celebrate what our team had done, but you made it out of like a thing that could not survive. That by like was like had a yam in the center of it, and so unless you kept this award in a freezer, it would disintegrate in like a week. And I'm sure, like we talked about, it's like there's no way that Ed meant this as some kind of
no.
ironic thing where it's like, here's a big award telling you how much we respect the work you've done and how great it is, but also it's doomed to explode and disintegrate in a week. And that's the message I'm trying to get across. I'm sure that wasn't in your mind, but what was it? What made you think that building a prize out of a vegetable was a good idea? Is basically my question.
Okay, that is absolutely fair. And is there a picture floating around of that?
Oh yeah,
We
yeah, yeah. We'll put one up here. Just
we
Okay,
have
okay.
there are there we have snapshots of it in that episode on
But
YouTube.
Gotcha. Yeah, sorry, I was just listening to the audio. I didn't see the video. Um, okay, so here was the theory.
Okay.
Number one, the genesis of the idea was like somebody around that time had given out a bunch of pig noses. Like,
That's
I don't
right.
remember if it was Ellen's team or whatever, but pig noses were floating around,
Right.
right? Um, and I had a pig
Like
nose in my
knock-on effects
car.
of a game idea that is inspiring people to get excited about it. But go on.
So I had a pig nose in my car and I'm driving home and I'm thinking about an all hands that's coming up the next day. I think it was day or two away. And I'm like, the pickup team, like these guys are doing the old PopCap thing. Like this is like, let's celebrate it because a lot of this change has been making people feel super anxious. They don't recognize the old PopCap, but like these guys are living it. I want to celebrate that. But how do I do that? I could give them a trophy, fine, but like everybody has these freaking trophies that go in a box, and then, once they move cubicles, never come back out. So I'm like, but what I want to do is I want to keep celebrating that. So the theory was that it was intentionally an of the moment reflection of this snapshot in time. It wasn't supposed to last, and the next recipient of that trophy was going to get their own custom ephemeral trophy that says the spirit of PopCap is here now, but it kept kind of remanifesting in different ways each time
Right.
it was
So as
uh
opposed to like a Stanley Cup kind of situation where it's like, each year or whatever, this gets handed off to another team, right? Like
yeah.
instead it's like we have a Stanley Cup and then you expose it to sunlight and it falls apart and then next year we create a new one. Like
And this time it's a unicorn head because we're
yeah.
celebrating the Peggle team or whatever. So the idea was it was going to be a traveling but customized.
I love that both of you have metaphors that you've come at it with that are just totally different metaphors, but are still that artistic sense about it. That's beautiful.
No, I had not thought about the metaphor of yes, this is actually dying from the inside out, and I know it, but they don't. The game
Well,
has as much
and we
fun as
never
this.
expected that you did see it that way. It was just that it's just that the symbolism was so impossible not to see. It's like, hey, congratulations, you guys are great. You're doing everything exactly the way you should. Oh, and by the way, your game's canceled.
Yeah.
It's just like, what? Like, it's like, well, we did mean it. We did think that it was good that you were doing all this, and we were genuinely doing everything we want everyone to do, but that unfortunately that is no guarantee of success either in this situation.
Well,
Like,
it was right around then that I was having a couple of meetings in your office, Ed, where we were talking about possible design for the game and kind of adding maybe a Farmville element to it, or just like what can we do? And so your vibe of like what can we do to save this thing like was palpable to me. Like I definitely had the sense that it's critical that this shows off a whole lot of potential early on, and there's a good chance it's not going to live long if it doesn't, because this is where we're at with in the company right now.
Yeah, and the other aspect I didn't really touch on is we were shifting to games as services. It used to be that you could wrap up a game, you shipped it on Real Arcade or put it up on the website, and if it sold, cool. If it sold 100 copies and you got five customer service calls, okay, cool, you could kind of take that. But a game as a service means you need to keep feeding it. You needed community management, you needed servers, you needed people keeping the servers up, you needed people managing the virtual currency, you needed to make sure that the virtual currency was backed up. We failed to do that once in Bejeweled Blitz and lost everybody's virtual currency.
Oh
Uh,
God. I don't remember that.
yep. And so I'm like, okay, but we've got it backed up. And Hans at the time was like, yes. And the backup was off-site, and we took the backup tape out of off-site and we tried to restore it, and it failed.
ugh.
And I'm like, but we've done this before, right? And they're like, we've been backing it up since the beginning, but we never tried to restore.
Uh, what's what's
Oh.
the what's the classic like two is one and one is none rule of backups?
People watching this are looking for any development gems. There's one for you. Like, test that out. Holy smokes.
That was early in my job as the in the new role, and I was like, "Oh, this is my job." We just lost everybody's virtual currency, and I've got
Oof,
to
oof.
I got to find a fire extinguisher big enough for that.
I
Yeah,
mean,
and
it,
that's the
it
thing
is. Yeah.
is Pig Up was positioning itself to be a game as a service, and yeah, to have all that infrastructure and have that kind
And
of
the community, I mean, like the whole business of the friend flapple. So it was designed to be like a Zuma Blitz or a Bejeweled Blitz with unusually powerful interplayer connectivity within the game. Plus, of course, all this like lore and the great graphics and from Matt and so on, such that had it had an opportunity to actually develop a community, and if we'd served that community, we might have ended up with a franchise.
I still ultimately I understand why we made the decision, and it was a spreadsheet based decision, but like my gut, even at the moment I was saying this is not going to go forward, was telling me it was the wrong thing. All the way to the point where after PopCap, I have a number of times like pulled out my old documentation to see how much legal trouble I would get in if I resurrected Pig Up and found you guys to like just go do it. And I even have
It's a
like a
good
couple
game.
Unity prototypes of like variants of the Pig Up mechanics because like I want to
it's
be able to
working
play
so
Pig Up.
good.
I
Yeah.
just want it to exist.
Well, I appreciate your candor on the pickup stuff. We're rolling into about 20 minutes left of the second hour, so get us out of PopCap, if possible, with enough time to really get into some of the cool stuff that you've done since. Is that fair, Isaac?
Oh,
Do you want to? Do you
absolutely.
want
Yeah.
to?
Did you start Wayward Distractions, the company that you release games through now? Did you start that right out of PopCap, or did you just kind of hang out for a while and
I hung out for a little bit and licked my wounds. I was very burned out after PopCap. The last year, the year of EA synergies, was not easy for me. I was the wrong guy, and so you know from very shortly after I started that role, most of my job was trying to figure out how I could engineer my exit without negatively impacting the people around me. So yeah, I licked my wounds for a little while and decided that whatever is next, I want to be making stuff. So yeah, maybe a year or so after PopCap, I created sort of the idea of Wayward Distractions, and it's intentionally sort of vague. It's not just games; it's just sort of my this is the stuff I do. Started doing some board game prototyping, started doing some virtual reality prototyping, you know, AR kit for Apple and virtual real or not virtual, but augmented mixed reality stuff. Was kind of kicking around. I had some ideas for that. Kind of playing around with some ideas and just actually just trying to dust off all of the cobwebs of being a constructive creator
figure
and
out how to have fun with this stuff again?
you know
Yeah.
sort of undo the management lobotomy that I'd gone through uh, in my story arc at PopCap. And as a result, I've sort of kept myself open to a lot of game adjacent stuff. And so I'd
Mhm,
say the
mhm.
bulk of what I've done, other than Space Otter Charlie, has been things that are game like, but not really just like, hey, make a game and bring it to market on Steam or bring it to market on mobile. I've done a couple of those, but some other stuff has been collaborating. I spent some time at Magic Leap. I had an amazing opportunity to work with Neil Stevenson on that. Neil Stevenson had a small studio in Georgetown here in Seattle, doing some content work for Magic Leap devices. And we're just trying to figure out like how do you tell a story in mixed reality and how interactive versus linear is this kind of new, really weird medium where we can bring digital actors into a space that was also physical and really there. So that was really fun. I brought Dan Benet from
Yeah.
PopCap into that. It'd be fun for you guys to connect with Dan Benet. That guy, I don't know how much
Always loved Dan. Yeah, and it was
he
great when he
is
brought
such
over
a
the
cool
Magic Leap
character.
Goats demo to our little studio there. That was fun.
Oh, right. Yeah. And also Matt Scott spent a little
Great
time
guy.
working with Magic Leap. So that was very fun, very cool.
Well, so let's. I want to dive in a little. So tell our listeners what is Space Otter Charlie?
Yeah, so Space Otter Charlie was okay, like I want to go make a game again. Can I do it? Like, can I do the thing that I did way back in Feeding Frenzy again? And so I sort of started teaching myself Unity, kind of reconnecting with my programming roots and reconnecting with some old PopCap personalities. I had a weird dream where like I'm a super into sea otters. And I had this weird dream where, like, hey, sea otters would be really well suited to navigating in space in zero G. Just think about the way they dive and they dart, and they kind of push and they glide until they find something else to push off of. Like that could be cool. I get like, what if we made a game about space otters? And so I prototyped up a little Unity prototype, convinced myself, cool, I want to make it. Convinced myself that it was going to take 3 or 4 months, and maybe help from one or two people for 3 or 4 months. And we'd go make a game, and I'd be like, all right, cool, I got it out of my system. I made a game. And so I gave Jeff Weinstein a call, said, "Hey Jeff, like I could use some coding help on this thing. There's gonna be a lot of code. Do you want to make a game? What are you doing?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So he came and actually did some work on the early code of Space Otter Charlie, and then called favorite buddy to work with, the guy who walked into our office with random imagination cards,
The one and only.
Matt Holmberg, and said, "Hey, space otters, what do you think?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm down." I think that was literally the response that his email, "I'm
We
down."
had we had just finished Space Tyrant, so he was already in space. All you had to do is add otters, and he's off and running.
So we started making it and started realizing that, okay, well, I got a couple people working on this. It's gonna take a little longer than I expected. And some of that money from the PopCap buyout is just sort of disappearing and disappearing and going into this game. And okay, but like it was just supposed to be a quick little turnaround. But then I'm like, no, I got to get it over the finish line. I just have to finish making something.
Right.
It's been way too long. So kind of doubled down on saying, yeah, I'm going to finish it. Realized that level design was a huge element to that, and that the game needed more code, the game needed more levels, and I couldn't do both more code, more levels, all the music without some more help. So I knew Isaac had been working at Blue Wizard, uh,
There we
and
go. Yep.
had been doing some level design for the egg game, Shell Shock, right?
Oh, Shell Shockers. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'd done a bunch of level design for that.
And so I'm like, hey, like Isaac, what are you up to? Otters, like homebrew tools, Jeff, who swears a lot in the office, and Matt Holmberg.
It
Um,
was awesome, and Matt and I had just also spent years working on Space Tyrant together and really developed a great kind of language, the kind of language you develop where you almost don't need to say the words, just you're on the same page about stuff all the time, and
And,
that
and
was
did you
helpful.
guys have like a common workspace the way that Blue Wizard did with Space Tyrant?
Yeah,
Really? Huh.
it was awesome. It was down in Georgetown in this little room. It was like us and like maybe a few centipedes, and
there's
yeah,
some
yeah.
large centipedes in that space. Holy hell.
Ed, for the people out there, Ed hates centipedes, and to this day, whenever I see something centipede-like, I'm like, God, should I send it to Ed? Oh, I probably shouldn't. I don't want to torture him. But in
Centipedes
fact,
shouldn't be that big.
yeah, there's big suckers in there. But did you see a game? There's an India game recently where you're running down a shaft and you're chased by a giant centipede, and that's the whole game.
I did see it.
I was like, oh man,
No, I almost threw up. I
yeah.
couldn't. I couldn't. Yeah, so we're in Georgetown for a little while, and then something went down. Oh yeah, I think in the mix of all this, my dad passed away,
Sorry.
and so like that was a big disruptive thing. But I kind of wanted to keep things going. But the commute over to Georgetown was a lot, and I was sort of dealing with a lot of stuff back in West Seattle, and so we switched over to a space over in West Seattle for a little while. I ended up taking over more of the coding side of things, and so Jeff decided to move on. And so it was me, Isaac, and Matt in a tiny little room that leaked from the ceiling
That's right.
um, in West Seattle until COVID hit. And then, well, COVID hit and the bridge to West Seattle went away. And so, yeah, we finished it virtually, right? We finished that just,
I th I think that was it. Yeah, like yeah, COVID hit, and I remember I got really sick right around then too. And because I've been bussing out there, and yeah, some by the time I was better and we're back at it, it was like that was pretty much the end of the game. And I don't remember if I went out. I went out of the office to help you to empty stuff out to a storage unit at one point.
yeah.
But that was, yeah, but that kind of closed it off. You probably added finishing touches on your own after that. But, and I've been wanting to say this too, like, I had known you at PopCap. Like, I knew that you did a lot of work at Sprout on the games, more hands-on, but at PopCap, you were in kind of more of a managerial role. So we went to work on Space Otter Charlie, and I watched you handle some of these bugs and things that came along. I was like, holy shit, like Ed is like this powerhouse coder too. Like, how it kind of blew my mind. I was like, I was super impressed. I'm still super impressed by just the fact that you're like, no big deal, just slide into this like deep developer role and handle all this stuff without, and it just didn't seem to bug either. Like I've known a lot of coders that just get really bent out of shape by some of the bugs and things they run into, and you just seem to just like glide right on through whatever came at you until the game came out. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. That's kind of, kind of in my roots is even just from an early age,
Just
writing code.
it's a great game loop in itself. Like you came back to the thing that you're passionate about, that you love, and had a successful release of a game with it.
Video games, I always sort of describe them as like a triangle of labor where there's code, there's objects on the screen, so art, there's code that moves the objects around, and then there's a set of rules for how that will be. So you've got your art, your code, and your design. All three of those roles can be done by one person, or you can split them up however you like. And of course, then there are ancillary things like music and sound and community, like, and then everything sort of grows out from those three elemental things. But if you don't have design, code, and graphics, then you don't have a video game. But like code ultimately does seem like the one that is just like this is the most central of these. Having the ability to get in and deal with the code is at some level, to my mind, always going to be the most fundamentally useful ability in the video games business, right? Ultimately, you're always going to be stuck in a sense. Like if you have no artistic ability, you're going to be stuck relying on an artist, and if you have no design sense, but I don't think anybody thinks they have no design sense. Everybody thinks their idea for a game is great, even if it's terrible. But I don't think people who like I mean I know that I don't know how to program, right? So I know that's like a blank spot for me.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I really enjoy is even though I don't have art skills, I think Isaac, you've seen some of my developer art.
Beautiful.
Clearly do not have art skills. Matt Holmberg has he's kept some of my developer art
He
because
loves
he's
that
really
shit.
it's
That's terrific.
glorious. We've even talked about curating a show of like an art show where we hang developer art on the walls where there's no artist
Where
involved. It's
things are just a bright orange color and like kind of a weird cutout shape, and yeah,
just all programmer art. But one thing I really, really enjoy is being a translation layer between those disciplines, because sometimes people who are really, really good at code don't understand how to communicate with an artist.
hmm
People who are really good at art don't understand how to communicate with a coder.
hmm
People who are really deep into design have a hard time translating that into the other disciplines needed to realize it. And I think being able to speak a little bit of each of those languages is something that's consistent with all of the producers at PopCap.
hmm
Starting with Jason Kapalka, who wasn't a coder, but he understood intuitively enough that he could interact with Brian Feet.
It's very technical, yeah.
Not sure we've disproven that he's a robot. Like he's
I'm
he's
sure he is.
he's pretty straight up, super technical. And John Vici just sort of spoke his own language, but like being able to communicate between those disciplines is what often makes a game or doesn't make a game.
Well, and to me, I think that's one of the soft skills that makes for a good designer, right? Because again, as you say, like the designer, you are if you are occupying that role as a third person, which is slightly less fundamental than the art, the object that moves around the screen and the code that moves it. Like the designer is one level of abstraction away from that pure fundamental labor, I guess. But if one chooses to make that its own separate role and then take it on, then yeah, then like in my role, my responsibility as a designer on the games that I've designed on is reaching back and forth between the artists and the coders to like say for years at PVZ2, I mean, one of the main responsibilities was come up with plants. So it's like, okay, I've got to imagine a plant, and that has to I have to be able to communicate what I have in mind for it to the artists in order for them to animate it. I need to communicate that what I expect it to do to the coders, and I need to help them communicate with each other about how to make sure that all that stuff clicks together and works properly, right? Like how all the effects manifest themselves and all that. So
And I think a lot of times people will ask old timers like us, how do you get into the game industry? And I really like to say, learn a little bit about everything and then learn how to communicate. Because like
Yeah.
there will always be a role for somebody who can communicate across the team. And unless you're that sort of deep single discipline
or
person,
or you're the kind of person that's like, no, I've completely mastered this other thing and it's everybody else's problem to figure out how to communicate with me.
right? Or it's 10,000 hours being an animator, and
Yeah.
then then you're an animator. It's sort of one of those two, but it's the people who communicate are tricky to find, I think.
You worked on a project with James Gortzman a while back that involved kind of stuff that I had never considered or heard about people doing so much before. Can you talk about the project that you guys worked on and kind of what you did with that?
Is this the Burning Man project?
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
a
Okay.
project called Prairie's a Possibility. It debuted on Mercer Island and then in a bigger way out on at Burning Man. And James was always a big idea kind of person. He didn't do anything small. So he approached me and he's like, "Hey, I got this idea where I want to do these plants that are like 5 feet tall, and they're all microcontroller, like RGB colored LEDs with these crazy fiber optic stalks that you can control. And I want to create like a field of them. And I want to be able to control them, from a central place, put music uh, throughout the field, maybe spatial music. And like, I want to create this interactive, maybe that's interactive, maybe it's just sort of reactive to the music. But I like want to create this field of, these things. And by the way, I've already designed the single piece of hardware and I'm having them built in China right now. And there's going to be 300 of them, and it's going to be in a field that's, 250 feet. It's going to be in a circle, filling a circle of 250-foot diameter.
Hmm.
Uh, right. So I was with them up until the wait, what? And so I said, yeah, sure. And I joined the team. It was just kind of a cool community art project with a handful of us. And a big part of it is how you're going to control these things. And so I created a Unity simulation of the entire field because you couldn't set this thing up and then work on it. So
Hmm.
to figure out what everything was going to look like, we created a Unity simulation of this whole field that you could walk through and created a sort of a mechanism for choreographing the lights on all of these. There's 7 points of light. It's like 2,000 lights that you're individually controlling from this simulation
Wow.
that you're kind of through all the is actually very demo scene in its approach.
So would the Unity system then did it then turn out to be something you could then wire back out to the
Yeah,
the stuff to make it do the stuff? Okay.
exactly. Yeah. So we Unity is great because people create plugins for all kinds of stuff. And so there's a DMX lighting controller plugin that we were able to just pull in and fire stuff out to the network. It was a like installing this thing was an entire day of just rolling things out onto the field and figuring out how to connect wire X to wire Y for a
And then
whole team of
test it
people.
all. Jeez.
And then we plugged it in. It was the day before we actually opened it to the public. We plugged it in for the first time. We never seen more
And
than
then and
like
then
five of
only
these things
then did
happening at
James
once.
reveal that it was actually a necromantic summoning for the Black Pharaoh.
Surprise,
That
Ed.
all this talk about a community art project was just a cover story.
So yeah, it was really fabulous. And then I my parenting duties kept me away from Burning Man that year, but he brought out to Burning Man with the rest of the team, and they did it 2 years in a row, I believe.
Oh, cool.
The next year he made it was bigger. They added another 100 lights, and we got a little more intricate in the choreography. I did a couple music tracks for it.
Thank you for talking about that. And I'm curious what you're up to moving forward now. You spent a little time working at one of the big companies, and now you're not doing that. What's in the future for Ed?
I am trying to figure out what's in the future for Ed. So I just finished about 9 months helping do some prototyping on a robotics project, which is weirdly game-like in its sort of disciplines of needing to bring design, code, user experience, but in this case also hardware, right? The realities of joints that need to move and stuff like that.
Was there an AI element to that?
Yeah, there's an AI element to that, which is sort of where my current confusion about where my future goes comes
Hmm.
from. So I got to really spend some good time with AI and trying to find the good and the bad and how that impacts both sort of user experiences and user facing stuff, but also how that experience impacts the experience of coding. Because AI is rapidly taking cycles away from humans in terms of programming time.
It's a
Um,
big crossroads for a lot of
it's
people, I
it's
guess.
it's definitely very weird to be, the guys who saw the printing presses coming, or the various automation on, in Detroit or whatever.
I
Like
mean,
it's weird to be
on
on the receiving end of that automation hammer that's coming,
I
for
mean,
knowledge.
one of the previous podcasts, I mentioned this thing that Jason had put together. Now, we talked earlier about how Jason himself is not a coder, but if you go to golfguardian.io, there's like a basically a vector graphics style arcade game about trying to, as it turns out, fruitlessly defend a bunch of ships making their way through the Straits of Hormuz,
Oh,
with the
very
joke
Jason.
being that you can't
Classic.
actually defend the ships. But like Jason created that all with vibe coding with AI, right? Like he took the time to sit down with Claude and just work through it over the course of a few days, basically just finally getting to the point where he no longer needed to work with a human programmer to bring a game to life. It's
Yep.
crazy.
Yeah, and so it's sort of this weird intersection of is exciting and powerful and empowering to take coding and put it into the hands of whoever wants to create something, but also just sort of like disheartening, and kind of a huge part of my identity has been in the fact that this is a skill that I have that is increasingly like, devaluing itself, by the minute out in the world.
I guess it's sort of like people enjoy pottery as a hobby, even though I think humanity has mastered mechanized pottery for
Yep.
like many centuries. And so it's not like it's news that it's like, you can actually make a clay bowl with a machine and you can make thousands of them. And yet people still get some pleasure out of the process of doing pottery, right? So maybe it's that, but yeah, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, so I'm kind of I think I don't have a smart answer to what all that nets out to. I'm much like many people in the tech world. I'm sort of navigating it both in my
Yes.
my heart and my head.
Sort of
Um,
feeling our way through the fog of ignorance and reluctant
yeah,
to just go, okay, Claude, tell me how I'm supposed to feel about all this.
and it's pretty interesting to watch my kids. My kids are teenagers now, and what their reactions are to all this stuff. it's a little heartening to see that they're both like vehemently anti-AI. They want nothing to do with it. They don't use it to cheat at school. They don't use it to, find new music. They don't use it to do anything.
But I suspect that even another half generation behind, it won't even be controversial. You just be like, oh, I'm a 4-year-old kid, and so of course my first animation experience is just by going up to the thing and saying, I want to see Popeye do blah, 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 and just explaining to the cartoon making program what the cartoon you want to see is, essentially as if the same thing as what they do in Star Trek The Next Generation when they go to a holodeck. They just go like, hey, blah, blah, blah. I want to do like a Sherlock Holmes-esque sort of mystery, and I want it to be like that, and yada, yada. And it just paints it in, and nobody thinks for a second that they're taking work away from set designers or costume makers or storytellers. And I kind of have a feeling that, yeah, like kids are just kind of, it won't even register in the same way that like it never would have occurred to any of us to think that there was anything wrong with using a computer to make art.
You mentioned the heartening aspect of watching how your kids are responding to it. I've noticed a lot of this as well, where there seems to be a lot of folks leaning back into just playing music and going out to see bands play and to go to art galleries and to just experience like organic life. That we've had a lot of digital stuff pushed at us for a long time, and it's getting thick and intense. And yeah, that kind of it is heartening to see kids like, I'm gonna go play in a band,
Like choosing
like
to
yeah.
like making the conscious choice to reclaim some humanity.
Yeah, yeah, because it just feels good. It feels good for the soul, and it's a great contemplative space when you're away from a screen and you're just hearing sounds and you're putting sounds together and you're communicating with other people and you're working together to make that stuff. And it, the drag is that there's no money in it, but sometimes a little. There are
The
people that push through and find some money in it, but in a lot of cases,
yeah,
it's just us enjoying our lives. How dare we? But
yeah, the question of survival is we don't have a great answer for yet.
yeah.
Well, I think we've been at it for a couple of hours here. This is the end of part two of our wide-ranging conversation with former PopCap executive and senior producer Ed Allard. I want to stress everyone like, subscribe, tell your friends, do the podcast thing, all that. Isaac, anything you want to add to wrap up here?
Just thanks, Ed, for coming on and spending this time with us. Totally been a person where just been curious about your perspectives, and we've always had good conversations over the years. So I appreciate you opening up to our audience and letting them hear all this stuff. And it's been great talking to you.
Absolutely. And thank you for doing it. I mean, it's been absolutely wonderful to see and hear old voices and faces. And it's been great to remember, because most of my memories from PopCap are the more recent sort of wounds inflicted. And so the emphasis that you guys have been placing on what an amazing, positive place it was to be has been great. It's been great to relive that because it was an hands down the best place I've ever been and a glorious place to work while we were able to keep it there.
Yeah.
For that all too ephemeral golden age. Okay, well, with that, this has been yet another episode of the unofficial PopCap Popcast. Yeah! PopCap!
I
Wait, what do we got? Yeah, buddy.
Oh, it's
Oh, there it is.
blurring out. There we go. Free ball. Okay, no, it's killing it again. Come on, Zoom. Give us some clean video here. There we go. Oh man.
What? We got two of them.
Wink.